Good day, dear listener. Thank you for your interest in sustainable development and clicking on our video. My name is Irena Goryans, a Master in Engineering and Petrophysics Specialist. Today's podcast topic is how youth and energy communities can help achieve SDG7. This is just one of many podcasts with experts in the series of Global Energy Community, or short GEC. GEC is a decentralized platform for uniting individuals globally around the goals of affordable and clean energy. We share our knowledge and collaborate with experts around the world who share their experience with us and, by extent, you, listener. Whether you're a student, an aspiring energy leader, or a seasoned advocate for sustainability, this webinar is an opportunity to learn, share, and get inspired. So, SDG7, to refresh our memory, is one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals developed by the United Nations, representing affordable and clean energy. It is a critical goal for ensuring access to sustainable, reliable, and modern energy for all. Achieving it requires collective action, and youth have a pivotal role to play as innovators, leaders, and active contributors within their energy communities. Today, we are honored to have Thomas Zeinzinger, an expert in energy transition and sustainability, to guide us through this vital discussion. Together, we will explore actionable ways young people can drive renewable energy initiatives, improve energy efficiency, and influence policies for a greener future. So, thank you, Thomas, for joining our community and making the time to talk about this topic with me. The floor is yours for starters. Tell us something more, please, about your career path, maybe from a young energy enthusiast to an expert.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Well, my career path. I'm rather kind of all over the place. So I studied agricultural. I went to an agricultural school. Then I studied material science at the mining university here in Austria. Um, I had a general interest always in energy and energy efficiency and general efficiency. When I left university, I worked for ThyssenKrupp, which is basically known as a steel company, a major one, but they also had a very big automotive business at the time. That was early 20s or 2000s. And after a couple of years and getting into improving processes, I moved on to Magna, which is a big automotive parts supplier on a global scale, and worked close to Graz, where I live. And there I was kind of tasked with all these improvement activities. So you do a lot of kind of process analysis and stuff like that. And from there on, I moved to Siemens. So I was in the transformer business. I was in the headquarters, and I was responsible for improving processes on in the transformer business on the global operations. So we had more than 20 locations all over the globe, and basically I was kind of improving processes there. And then a little bit more than 10 years ago, I moved away from Siemens. I got self-employed. I did some consulting. I started a co-working space. I went 16 into the blockchain and crypto space. Then I worked in a lot of R&D projects, or several R&D projects, where we always had a very close relation to the energy business. And since a couple of years now, we are very deeply immersed into improving or working towards the energy transition and applying everything what kind of was learned the past 10 years, let's say. So that's about me in a nutshell, hopefully.
Amazing. From agriculture to development and the R&D and chain. It's wow. Uh, did you so I can assume Kaizen is very important, was very important for your work. And did you go to different um, how do you say, companies to assess their own processes and maybe improve them? Or were you mostly specialized and stationed in your company and your production line?
Well, with Siemens, I was kind of going to the all the other locations within the group. So of course there we had all the improvement activities like Kaizen or uh, lean production system introduction, and individual improvement proposals implemented as a process, and of course executed within all those locations. So you're kind of it's a very, as you can imagine, within a company, it's a very kind of how can you have savings or good savings for the company if you're executing one of those projects, and that's the main focus. And of course, yes, I at the end at Siemens, I was traveling like 80% of my time. That was probably also one of the things why I left.
Too much of travel also not very good.
Well, traveling is fine, but at some point it becomes a little bit exhaustive. So it's like if you're traveling too much, it's also not a very good thing. So, but it's interesting. Do it for a certain amount of time, and you see a lot of things and learn a lot of amazing people, and meet people all over the places. Especially if you're working for a multinational, which has operations in a lot of countries.
So during those travels, did you meet actually some of the youth-led energy communities, or um, only youth interested in energy and sustainability?
Not really. So when you're working for those companies, you're very focused on the job you have to do. And if you think about youth-led energy communities, or energy communities in general, it's rather a question of how you define what is an energy community, and I'm pretty sure that is very different depending on what kind of country you're going or what kind of block you're into, because if you're thinking about energy communities, it very much depends on what you are allowed to do in a particular country. So if you're, let's say, if you're here in Europe or like me in Austria, it's an extremely densely, tightly regulated space. Um, you might find other regions on the globe where you can do almost everything, and nobody will kind of stop you on doing it. And here you can't, because regulation is defining everything.
And when did you actually how much do you have now, for instance, after you've went from working on specific tasks, companies, for instance, as I do now, I am confined in my company, and pretty much when I'm at work, it's 8 hours only focused on the tasks that are right in front of me, the deadlines, the everything that I have to do. And when you transitioned from those types of jobs to a little more self-employed, self-sufficient expert. When do you now have more time and places where you can actually help the youth and talk more about their engagement?
Yeah, absolutely. Because basically, when you're not within, let's say, a big multinational company, or even just a regular company, not necessarily a multinational one, You have a lot more space, a lot more freedom, a lot more you can follow your interests. Um, and that's also the reason why I can't imagine going back uh, into that kind of confined space, because it's like whatever you do, whatever you think of, it's it's much broader today. So it's like because we are working in a small team, you have to do so many different kind of things that your knowledge becomes much broader, and your skills are shaped in many different ways than what you might learn in a company. Because in a company, you are responsible for a certain task, and you are supposed to do that particular certain task, and somebody else is responsible for the work before, and somebody else is responsible for the work after. So you are just doing your task, and you're doing it as good as possible, but the overall outcome is something which is shaped by a lot of people within the whole chain. So if you're in a smaller team, if you're free to decide and what to do, you might run into this direction the one week, and then you find out this is maybe should be slightly corrected into another direction, and you just change it. In a company, you can't do that, because all changes, all kind of new things, all kind of things you want to do have much more time before in preparation. Then you do it. If you find out it's not really the best case, you have others which think it in a different way. Then you have to convince each other what might be the best way of changing things. And then you're kind of finally getting there that you can do something. So it's it's well, coming back and coming a little bit to the youth question, because at some point I also was young, so uh, I I was a kind of a flamethrower when I was like starting with my stuff. So it's like, okay, you're getting in somewhere and you're saying, oh, well, my goodness, they're so dumb. Why they're doing it this way or that way, and I don't understand that. That's partially true, partially not true, because partially it's kind of connected to you have not the experience, you don't know the reasons, you don't know why things are done the way they are done. And for myself, it worked quite nicely that I basically I developed this kind of initial urge, or kind of suppressed my initial urge to kind of think, why would somebody do that? It's like I ask myself from a curious perspective to say, oh, why does somebody do it this way or think it this way? So this helps a lot to kind of ask these kind of curious questions, and you learn a lot more why things are done the way they are done, and then you're getting much more respect because you show interest. You're showing you're showing you're showing decency. So it's like but on the other sides, I got this feedback, let's say when I started at Siemens, I was kind of asking around why things are done the way they are done. Um, and 2 years later, I talked to a guy. He said, well, I totally underestimated you when you came here, because you were asking all these questions. And of course, I was asking the questions. I didn't know why the people are doing it, but it's really important to understand if you want to change things. And otherwise, it's like you're just trying to cut through everything, and that's kind of possibly destroying the whole thing, what is kind of built by the previous people there. So it helps a lot to be curious.
One interesting fact, when I was deciding whether I'm going to study what I actually studied, which is exploration and development of oil and gas, I was completely against it. I was like, no, I'm a technical ecologist, I'm an engineer in protecting nature and so on. And my dad actually said to me, how are you going to change something when you don't know how it's working? you have an opportunity, you can start learning, you can learn it from the inside, and you can't change something overnight, but you can learn about it and morph it into something that can maybe actually be sustainable.
Mm,
So
sure,
that's
sure,
it kind
absolutely.
of it reminded me of that.
Yeah.
That's nice.
So I think it's important to not rush things, even if we, well, if we take current state regarding climate change, you would have the urge to rush things, but it's also difficult because, well, I was doing Six Sigma. It's a tool set for improvement. It's quite an old one. It was very famous when I basically started in the early 2000s, and uh, the the so I got distracted by my son. So sorry. Anyway, the um, the Six Sigma tool, it had a kind of a formula there. So it's like the result is kind of is affected by what you want to do. So basically the things you implement, but also times acceptance. So you have to think of both. If you're doing something which is very good, but it's not accepted, it's still zero results. So the result is extremely important, that you don't forget that acceptance has to be uh, coming with you what you do. So getting the others kind of behind what you're doing is just as important as the thing what you're doing. Otherwise, it's just not leading towards the result what you want to do. So if you're aiming for sustainability, or if you want to reduce carbon emissions, you have to make sure that um, you are not just implementing the best possible option for carbon emissions. Let's take electric cars. You also have to make the acceptance within the population that they're buying the electric cars, and that they find electric cars better than petrol or diesel cars. And if you're forgetting that, then your result is still underwhelming. So basically, you always have to think of that. So if you have a good politician out there, they think of both. So they're doing the policy stuff, but they're also thinking about the what do we need to sell it? What do we need as a support for it? And those goes both ways. So basically, the ones which uh, cater towards continuous fossil fuel burning, they will do the same as the others. So it's like it's a continuous fight, and mostly it's kind of supported by big money made in the fossil industry,
Yeah.
because the other one is just growing, so it's not as big. So once it's overcome, then it's probably a walk in the park. But at the moment, I would not see that. Um, so currently, I would say uh, we're getting there. That it's a economical issue, that you're kind of not burning coal anymore, or not burning fossil fuels. Or let's put electric car again, because that's super simple. The efficiency is so much better than your if you are living in a
Average
country.
diesel.
Hmm?
Average diesel car. It's more efficient than the average car that
Yeah, it's
we
it, it's
use.
it's basically 3 to 4 times more efficient. So basically, it
Uh,
depends a lot on how much is asked from you to pay for the gasoline or for the diesel, and how much you have to pay for the power you could charge into an electric car. And then of course there is the price of the electric car itself is also an issue. So it's a combination of many things, and the success of it depends on mostly on the economics of all those things playing together.
yeah, I would only add to this also the strategies before, during, and after. Because it's okay, we know how to make it, we know how to use it. Okay, we will do the policies, we will make the people love it. But then it also doesn't work forever. What are we going to do with it afterwards? That also is one of the strategies that should be in every single part, I believe, in our mm, life cycles. The life
Yeah,
cycle actually is the ending of a life.
yeah. I mean, I agree with you, but it's mostly a point which is, in my opinion, emphasized by the ones which don't want to change. Um,
Ah,
because the let's say if you have a lot of batteries coming to the scrapyard, you will also have a big industry because lithium is expensive, cobalt is expensive if there's cobalt in there. Iron, of course, not, but nevertheless, you find your strategies to get the metals back. But it depends also on the economics. So basically, economics are affected by policies. It is affected by volume. So as long as there are just a few cars out there which don't come to the scrapyard, you won't find the industry which cares about it. And of course, it depends on the policy in the country where you live in, what happens to those cars. But it's like I'm totally optimistic that well, I know that solutions are out there. So the question is just when do they have the necessary scale to do it? But you have a lot of fear mongering that sustainability is not taken into consideration, and nobody's talking about coal ash from a coal firing plant, while everybody's talking about windmill plates which are buried somewhere, which is completely meaningless if you compare it to a coal-fired power plant, what they have on ash out there. So
yeah.
it's like there are things which are completely skewed into a wrong direction.
There are
But
still
yeah,
places there are still places that don't have electric cars. They don't have lithium batteries at that scale, but they do have ash piles and therm- thermoelectric and yeah,
sure,
yeah.
sure, absolutely,
So we
absolutely.
do need to take a look at the problems that are there as well, and not think and make excuses for changing something that still isn't in our facilities. Oh,
Yeah.
and since we are still with the local governments and policies organizations, so let's think of it as the government actually wants to help the youth. So what are the best ways that maybe local government or organizations of a bigger stature can do to support youth involvement in the energy policies and the energy efficiency projects? What
Um, hmm, what can governments do? I usually address the youth directly because I think youth can do really a lot. Of course, it depends again where you live, but let's take the youth here. The youth here could easily influence their parents and grandparents because they own the money. The youth doesn't. So they have the money to buy those cars, buy the solar photovoltaic system for the houses. They have the money to buy the batteries. They're able to do all these investments, and they don't necessarily have to look at is it economically sound to the last euro, if you're looking at that one. Um, and and if let's say there is much more, the youth can influence their parents much more than they sometimes think, in my opinion. And they themselves, they cannot do that much because they lack the economical power. So they need to do the convincing stuff for the ones which have the economical power to do the investments. I mean, investment it needs. So renewables and the storage of renewables needs a lot of investments. Um, and from there, I see actually the most direct impact for basically everybody. Um, and of course, others which are politically interested, interested in the legal process and have means to change the regulation, and are interested in doing that. That's also a very, very valuable thing. So doing petitions and stuff like that to kind of assemble people really in changing regulation, because at the end of the day, as long as you are not living in a completely unregulated kind of environment, then everything is kind of defined by the regulation of that particular country. And here in Austria, we have a very good regulation when it comes to energy communities. So the European Union, it defines basically what energy communities are. There are citizen energy communities and renewable energy communities. Two types of energy communities are, and Austria did a regulation or adjustment of regulation to allow these energy communities within the energy regulation, and make it rather simple to form those energy communities within the complete framework of how electricity is handled in Austria. Um, and it is going even beyond the thing what the European Union was actually defining. But it also kind of was shaped by the Greens within the government, and I think it is kind of a good coincidence that we got a very good regulation on energy communities here in Austria, and which gives you a lot of freedom. But at the end of the day, also the energy communities need to work towards a functioning electricity system, to keep the lights on day and night and have the necessary power within the grid, which is extensive. So you can imagine this is a very, very, I mean, every Western nation has an extremely extensive grid and a structure which is totally kind of fine-grained, regulated, who is responsible for what and what you can do and what you cannot do. And therefore it's kind of you need some time to get into it, to understand it, to know what has to be done, and of course everything is changing so fast because the grid itself is not able to cope with all those renewables on the edges, and provide power maybe at times when you don't need it, but don't provide power when you would need it. So it's so much more difficult to keep it stable, but you learn a lot while you're doing it. So it's like, I mean, 10, 20 years ago, everybody was saying like 5% of renewables within the grid is already a problem. Austria has more or less 100% at the moment. I mean, we have a lot of hydropower as well. So it's not all volatile, of course. But also Germany is like having like 50% or 55% renewables, which is kind of unthinkable usually to keep a grid stable. So it is possible, but it is, of course, it's a very different kind of way of energy system. And when you introduce energy communities within that kind of system, you're changing again the power structure within that kind of establishment, incumbents driven energy system. So it's kind of a shake up a little. I mean, I digressed from your question about the youth. Sorry.
No, it's excellent. It should be a discussion more broad than just one simple question. I wanted to ask you what maybe you know some of the most innovative examples from youth-led energy communities in Austria that actually made a real impact.
I would not I would not be able to say there are especially youth-led energy communities. Um, to to be fair, I mean, Austria is rather having a demographic problem. Most people are of extended age, so beyond my age. So you see that when you do kind of town halls or meetings where you invite population, the people that come, they have a lot of time, spare time, because they're already in their retirement phase. There are, of course, a couple of younger ones, but usually family type. We're not talking about the very young ones. So the very young ones, they are not getting there because I think, well, uh, it's not at the forefront of what they are kind of dealing with in their life. So it's not in my opinion, it's not that interesting to work on it. Of course, there are enthusiastic people and people which work on it, but I was in connections with people from from Lost Generation and from um, um, yeah, I got this feeling that kind of protesting for climate action was the main focus within Fridays for Future and Lost Generation. Different means, different ways. Um, but whenever trying to doing the other thing where I believe it's very important to get engagement, like in the legal process, in the policies which are kind of shaping the whole thing, or let's say convincing parents and relatives to do something with their own money to go in the right direction. There I did not see the full activity. So right now we are like um, there are the people which are extremely interested in tinkering with energy and electricity. So this is rather a nerdy kind of business. So
Mhm.
it's like you're saying, oh, how much power did I produce yesterday, and what did I store in my battery, and how can I even improve my self-sufficiency even by 5% more, and that kind of thing. So it's becoming a kind of I want to be independent. And I want to be not dependent on price wars on the gas market or on the oil and gas market. So there are these ones, and then there are, of course, the ones which also have the economical power to do the investment. Also, because we had this energy crisis just short time ago, and everything was super expensive, and of course the power went super crazy expensive, and people said, well, I'm not going to pay that much for my electricity. So they started investing into their own self-sufficiency, and now they're like having all those kind of solar panels on their houses and so on. Now they're like looking for, okay, how do I get still a decent price for my power, what I don't use myself and can sell? And that is kind of offered to energy communities. And in an energy community, of course, you need the ones which produce something and the others which consume it. So you're kind of in a search for the ones which consume it, and uh, that's actually more difficult to find than the ones which produce it, because the ones which produce it did it for economical reasons mostly, not for environmental reasons. So Austria kind of invested like um, last year we had 2.3 gigawatt, uh, yeah, gigawatt peak of installed capacity of solar, and the year before a little bit more than one. And it was the first year we ever reached more than one. And in total, we now have like 6 point something gigawatts. So you can see just in the last 2 years, Austria installed about half of its solar PV capacity um, due to the energy crisis.
Oh, and did Austria in these 2 years have any subsidiaries or policies that make it more economically it's probably more safer to buy it and to put your money in those solar panels, for instance, than to stick with the electricity that comes in the traditional way. You
Yeah, especially during that time, it was very expensive. Now it's not so, it's going down again, but of course you have it in the market. So there are different reasons why people invest. I mean, the last 2 years, it was mainly because of economical reasons. So it was, I'm pretty sure that we won't see that kind of high number this year again. But nevertheless, it still, I think it broke a dam, kind of. So like people are more thinking about having their own at least partial power supply, and of course with more and more installations, more and more knowledge is gained, and more you're learning more and more how to handle volatile kind of production of power within the grid, as well as basically on community level, how you can handle that. So it's at the end of the day, it is, in my opinion, a very cheap way. So if you're not living in Saudi Arabia or Iran or something where you basically oil doesn't cost anything, or gas doesn't cost anything, then it's very economical to have solar solar on your roof. And of course, depending on where you are on the globe, you might have a very stable supply, at least almost every day.
Mhm.
So I remember when I was in the US, so basically made 8 weeks trip, and then within those 8 weeks, we had never a rainy day in the West. So basically, it's almost all the time sunshine. So if you're having sunshine all day, then you just have to kind of get over the night and not kind of expect that you have bad weather and like 14 days nothing. So it's much more difficult when you live in a climate where you have all the time kind of longer phases of not enough power production. But in my opinion, um, yeah, challenges are here to overcome. So basically, wherever you live, you have better or not so easy to solve situations from an environmental kind of perspective, or let's say from a weather perspective. So depending where you are, uh, and of course with oil and gas, it's super simple. You're having it all over the place. You're transporting all over the place. But at the end of the day, it is a non-sustainable kind of thing what we're doing here. So it's kind of cooking the planet, and there are many regions which have not the means to invest in air conditioning to keep the temperature at a livable kind of healthy
And
kind of level.
it was very interesting for me to hear about the situation in Austria because, for instance, in Serbia, we don't, nobody's thinking even about putting solar panels on the roof. It's always like a super innovative thing. It's mostly done on a specific objects and it's marketized as something grandiose. And it's not something that a regular citizen is available to do. So, for instance, we do have
Hmm.
subsidiaries and like mm, downgrades for mm, the prices of the solar panels so that it would be more interesting for people to actually buy them and put them on their roofs. And usually it is done in private houses and not, for instance, like I'm living in a big a solitary type of full of many apartments, high buildings, and so on. So, is there buildings that are this type of high buildings with most really high number of apartments inside? Do they have solar panels in Austria?
Yes, they do. I mean, there is a special regulation. There is this third kind of energy community. Basically, if you're having it, let's say, if you're having um, a house with a lot of flats there, and you put solar panels on the roof, and or maybe on the facade on the south side, so that you can harvest as much electricity as possible. All the electricity you harvest on that kind of house doesn't have to pay grid fees. So you get it basically for the investment you had on that house for that solar PV. So and only the extra energy what you consume from the grid, you have to pay the grid fees. Um, and of course, that's interesting for the people which live there. In Austria, the policies have been relaxed how to come to a conclusion within the house community, because often you have multiple owners of those kind of those um,
Flats.
flats, yes, and then you have to come to a group decision. So the in previously 2 years ago, it was like you had to have a group decision unanimously. So you had to have 100%, everybody had to go for it. So this was relaxed from a regulatory side, that you now only need to have a qualified majority to be for it, to buy as a group for the house. And not everybody has to join, but everybody has to pay if the majority decides to invest into that kind of solar panels on the house. So you here again, in my opinion, it's super important that if you have those energy communities like this one, which is kind of nice because you don't have to pay the grid fees for all the electricity you consume in there, you need to have the right policies. So if you don't have the policies for it, then it won't happen. If you have a renewable energy community, which is around a substation or around a transformer, in Austria, it depends on the country, but in Austria, it's around the, let's say, substation or transformer. If we are forming an energy community, a renewable energy community around that substation, um, you need this kind of regulatory framework that, for example, the uh, grid operator provides you with the data that you can do the invoicing among the members within the energy community, because of course you have producers which should get money, and you have consumers which are consuming the electricity from those producers, and you need to define a price, and you need to kind of write invoices for buying that power and giving it to the consumers. And in Austria, they followed this kind of recommendation from the European Union that for the grid fees you pay less. So basically, within that renewable energy community, you have a discount on the grid fees because you're kind of consuming it from the surrounding area. So you're getting the electricity from the other houses and from the other producers, which live close by. So of course, you don't need so much of the grid for your electricity to get into your household. So therefore, you have reduced grid fees. You have reduced federal fees next year. So you get these kind of extra incentives due to you're using the electricity the way it's going to be produced, much more decentral, much more kind of um, much more close to your home. And therefore, you're also getting a financial incentive for doing so.
I really like it. I'm thinking about, so what can we suggest to youth? What are the skills and the knowledge they have to make the impact in the policies and working towards this type of energy self-efficient community?
Well, for example, if you're having somebody towards leaning towards regulatory and legal issues, it is always a good idea to look at, like, countries, in that case for Austria, how Austria did it, because that gives you ideas how you can do it at home in your country. Where are good examples? I mean, Austria is actually a typical case for other countries within the European Union, because Austria is the leading example how you can define energy communities within a very densely regulated energy regulation or electricity regulation. So it's like finding ways how you can handle it and how you can structure it. Austria is kind of a benchmark for other countries. So it is as a recommendation towards interested young people which want to shape things. If you're going into policy shaping, then look at other countries, look how they do it, how the policy really looks like. Maybe go for half a year there and work with somebody there and try to learn it really, the small details, because basically it is a lot of details, of course, and it's a little hard from far abroad to find out what are the real details, or you need to have the language, or you need to translate everything, and then still it's kind of hard to get into all those details. But basically, this is, in my opinion, for sure good to have a broad spectrum of how things can be done, and how you would kind of invest your time in your own country to shape policy making. And of course, the other thing is like, within the giving policy, it's like influencing the how things are perceived. I mean, how is an electric car perceived? How is solar panels perceived? How is a wind turbine perceived? How is a battery seen? All things which are, when we talk about emission reduction, and if you're talking about climate change, and if you're talking about sustainable energy supply, it must be clear that we have to phase out fossil fuels. But of course, the speed depends on a lot of factors. Speed depends on the economics. It depends on the situation, on the regulation, on power structures, and stuff. So learning how this is all done within a particular country is helpful to kind of develop a strategy for one person or for a group of young persons to kind of get the most out of it, and don't be too impatient. I mean, it's like those systems were not built within a day. They are built over decades, sometimes longer, and therefore you could not expect that the all the knowledge which went into it, building it, can be kind of understood within a month or maybe even a year. It takes kind of takes just a longer time how to understand it fully, and then kind of work on things which shape it into the right direction. That's yeah, resilience or determination is very important to change things. And of course, the better the insight you have yourself, the better you can get towards a good result, which you can be happy with, that you played a vital part in shaping it.
Thank you so much for your answers and this talk. It's already 3 o'clock for us. Oh, so sorry. So I believe we can already bring it to an end. We have our advices. So determination. Don't be too hesitant to do everything right away. Read through the policies, make adjustments in your community, and influence your family and your friends as much as you can in a good and argumentative ways, I believe.
And also the policymakers. So it's like
And policymakers.
influence or join them in influencing. So it's one of those other things which defines a lot. by just protesting, it won't change things. It's really like getting your hands into action is important, either by doing it yourself or by shaping the policy which defines it for a lot of people out there.
I've started dabbling in the circular economy strategies as well as Austria's circularity, and I was thinking about after that transitioning to the Swiss economics as well, and trying to figure out something that we can implement here in Serbia as well in the short period of time, as soon as possible.
Yeah. So it's like I think there is really a lot to do in all those yeah, getting less resource consuming things into place. And of course, on the other side, a lot of new things, they demand a lot of energy. So that's also the reason why I kind of focus so much on energy itself, because every kind of human development over the last hundreds of years was extremely dependent on the availability of energy. So the current modern kind of living standard what we have depends largely on oil and gas and coal, and transitioning away from it is a lot of work, and it's creating all kinds of new different kind of jobs, and therefore it's super interesting in my opinion that to do something in there, and it's much more thrilling than let's say when I was young, because basically everything was clear. I mean, you bought your car, you drove your car, you didn't think about it. Maybe some consciousness came around with recycling and that kind of stuff, but that won't change our emission problem. So changing the whole energy system and the way we do things, or heat our houses, or drive our cars, is completely rearranging everything. So it's much more yeah, a much more interesting kind of environment than when I was young.
We have our work cut out for us and the younger generations. I'm also transitioning into the older generations. Thank you so much. And thank you for all of our listeners that were listening to our podcast. And see you in the next one. Okay,
Thank you very much.